Hey everyone. All right. So let's get into our news. Now, I'm going to have to warn you, today's news is going to be shorter for a couple of reasons. First, it's Mother's Day, and I'm going to go spend some time with my wife. And if you have a mom and are watching this show, go ahead and spend some time with her and come back and watch this tomorrow, as it will still be recorded. And you don't have to. And if you haven't called your mom, at least, go ahead and give her a call. All right, that being said, so we've done some stuff for Mother's Day, as well as we ended up having a bug problem and had to leave our house for a day because of that. So a spontaneous camping trip was fun, as it was the only thing we could think of doing with COVID, but it was still spontaneous and took out some of my time. All right, that being said, let's get into it. Another thing that I am trying to do is to maybe focus these just a little bit more so that when I bring it to you guys, while I don't give you as much news, maybe it's a little bit more focused, a little bit more interesting, and break down those bits of news a little bit more in detail. All right, so let's jump into our first thing here. So the first thing that came to mind was the Nomad 1.1 release. Now, if you guys don't know what Nomad is, think of it as Kubernetes' little brother. Now, Nomad has been around for a little while, and I would consider it pretty stable, but this 1.1 beta is huge because it brings some stuff that's really been lacking in Nomad, or at least in my opinion. Now, that being said, if you wanted to ask me why I don't think Nomad has really blown up like Kubernetes, it's not because it's not technically good. I actually think it's technically better than Kubernetes in many ways. There are two problems that keep it from really doing what Kubernetes did. And that's one is strict corporate oversight. So there's a smaller community because there is a corporation that gains all control. There's no way for me to work my way up to having a say in any way in Nomad. And this also goes on with there's no other company that can either. So it's very much up to one single company. The other problem that it has is it's not all open source. You'll notice, let's go ahead and look down here. There's going to be these things called enterprise. And this means that while there's an open core, which is not available to other companies to use because the open core, I believe it's under the open source, the same one that the AGPL. It means that no other company can provide it as a service or really use it in something that they provide as a service. So while it's open core, you really have to pay to use it, and most of their security things are locked behind enterprise, as well as a lot of things like namespace support. So if you're really going to use this, you can basically only run it on one single node without paying for enterprise support, and this really hampers the open source community aspect of it. One second. This is one second. I think my camera's a little. Oh, not that. That's not what I meant. I meant to grab this. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. So anyways, that is Nomad. If you don't know what it is, I'll probably do a few videos on it eventually at some point because it's worth knowing. It's actually a pretty cool technology, and I wish it would go full open source at some point. Now let's go on and talk more about some open source projects. We've talked about how the main observability project kind of went non-open. I know the AGPL is still open source, but it's very hard to use it as a license. And so because of that, I don't know if it's because of that or what, but we have a new drop of a new observability platform by New Relic. Now, New Relic, I wouldn't consider doing a lot of open source, but a little while ago, they bought a piece of software, and they're now donating it to the CNCF. So this is Pixie. If you don't know what it is, it's what New Relic bought, and they're donating the whole project to the CNCF. So Pixie Labs is the company they bought, which brings Pixie. I'm going to do a little intro to Pixie. I'm going to actually see if I can't get one of the interviews with maybe one of their engineers to go technically into what Pixie does. It's actually pretty cool, and if nothing else, I will bring a video on using Pixie, but I thought I would throw it out there. If you guys are looking for observability and been struggling with understanding what observability you could do at this point, Pixie is something you should check out and is pretty cool. And I'm really excited that New Relic did that. All right, let's talk about Backblaze. So Backblaze basically does this once a year blog post that goes into hard drive stats, which I love looking at just to see which manufacturer of hard drives is the best at that point and has the fewest failures, and it's just interesting to look at. One cool thing that they did this year is they added SSDs to the drives that they monitor, and it looks like they performed fairly well. Now, that being said, while it does look like the SSDs did the HDDs versus SSDs looked really good, there was much fewer SSDs because they just haven't been around as long. So while they had a lot of them and they only had 2 failures, you're only talking about 12 months instead of 50 months as far as average drive time. So I don't know that it's as conclusive as some might state, but it is still an interesting look, and I look forward to next year's results because as it goes on, we're going to see more and more from them. All right. Oh, I should have shown this. This is the Pixie repository. So it is also Apache 2, which is good. So one thing I'm really liking about how New Relic has done this is they haven't held control for themselves. While their developers, I'm sure, are some of the ones that are controlling it, they've donated it to the CNCF. It's under the Apache 2. So it's a project you can actually develop your time to because you can trust that the CNCF isn't going to put this behind some paywall or change its license to something other than the Apache 2 and limit how other people can get your code. This is my biggest problem with donating my time to develop code for something like Grafana at this point, because if I do that, the company has now decided that they're the only ones that can profit off of code I gave them for free. And this is where I really like how they've handled Pixie and why I recommend, if you want to look into it, check out Pixie. All right, so I know I cover a lot about Rust, so if you don't like Rust, just zone out for just a little bit. Here is a new development workflow for Rust Arrow implementation. So if you don't know what Apache Rust or Apache Arrow is, it is... Yeah, you should check it out. We'll cover Apache Arrow at a later date, but it now is supporting Rust and is pretty cool. So you can check out this and basically check out the Rust implementation of Arrow and yeah, see what benefits it brings. All right, oh wow, I should not. This is a horrible website. We'll just not use that website. I'll find a better website for that, but this has actually been going on for a little while, and it's Red Hat's OpenShift is now, you can do it as a service on AWS. So what it means as OpenShift as a service, you've always been able to run OpenShift on AWS. But what it does now is it means basically you can get a whole managed service for you. You tell it how many nodes you need, and you don't have to worry if your AWS service is, or AWS, your AWS OpenShift Kubernetes cluster exists or not. Red Hat actually takes care of all of this for you behind the scenes, and they have their own SREs, which are very talented Kubernetes SREs, managing your clusters for you. And so it's actually pretty cool, and they do a lot of that through operators. So if you run in Kubernetes and are interested in, or run in OpenShift, there's now a managed service for you in AWS. I think they will probably be bringing that out for Azure and GCP eventually themselves. All right, let's continue on. This is how we move from, this is a blog post that I found really interesting. And basically, we always think of NoSQL databases as the faster alternative if you don't need the relational. And what I found interesting, I don't know this company at all. I'm not vouching for them or anything like that. But what I found interesting about this blog post is that they actually scaled better with Postgres. And basically, the article comes down to understanding your data and how your data does things. And if you're using a NoSQL database incorrectly, it actually then is worse than just using a relational database correctly. And so they cut down costs by 30%, which is a really big number, especially when you think about NoSQL as generally a efficient way to store large amounts of data. So anyways, it's definitely worth looking at, especially if you use databases or database heavy. I know almost every application uses databases. So anyways, check it out. I thought it was very interesting. All right, and then we're down to our last two things, which are two open source projects you should know if you don't know already. The first one is Counterfeit, which was released by Azure as an open source under the MIT license, which is a license that I support. Counterfeit is all about being a command line tool that I think it's supposed to probably be used in automation a lot, but it's basically there to help you assess the security of your machine learning models. So I know that there's a lot of things with tricking machine learning models into doing the wrong thing, and this is where Counterfeit is trying to step in and trying to make sure you build machine learning systems that aren't susceptible to attack. So this seems really cool. I have actually sent a couple emails out to the maintainers of this, and because I'm going to try to get an interview with them as well, because I don't even know how you would go about starting to do this. I would love to learn. I would love to hear from them about how they're doing it. And yeah, anyways, if you do a machine learning model, this is definitely something worth looking into. The last one is another security thing here, as we have a blazing fast security auditing tool for Kubernetes. So this is another project you should check out if you run in Kubernetes. And I know that a lot of people that follow me do Kubernetes stuff. Not all my projects are around Kubernetes. I try to make sure I point out things like Rust. But in this is another one. Anyways, KubeStriker is they say platform agnostic. It's Kubernetes, and because it's Kubernetes, it works on any Kubernetes cluster that you want, from self-hosted to Google and whatnot. And it basically does auditing of your Kubernetes. And so it's really cool. If you run Kubernetes, you should be worried about security and the tools that are out there to do it. So check it out. Give them a star. Like their project. I'm not signed in, or else I would start right now. Actually, I already started. Anyways, check it out and give them some support. All right, so that was my very fast Mother's Day special. Thank you guys for joining me. Please feel free to chat during it and ask me questions. Again, I know it was short, and I know I kind of breezed through it, but I have some other things that I would like to get to. That being said, hopefully next week the stream will be a little bit more polished. I know I said that last week, and then everything happened on Saturday, and it was Mother's Day, and I forgot that this week was going to be Mother's Day. So that being said, I lied. Next week, the stream will be a little bit fancier. I've been working on an animation I'm pretty happy with. All right. Guys, have a fantastic next week, and I hope to see you next weekend.